What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Legal Hands to the Face show. On this emotional Monday night, after an all-time Philadelphia Eagles great, a Philly sports legend, Jason Kelce officially announces his retirement. And now I want to bring in our Eagles insider, my man, John McMullen. What's going on, John?
Hey, Bill, how are you? Good to be here.
I don't think we've spoken since that wild card game, that disaster.
Oh, that was a bad game. Yeah, people are trying to put that one in the rearview mirror. Jason Kelce as well finally calls it a career after 13 seasons. So all of that sort of talk, after the game, he sort of told some teammates he was going to retire, and that got out, and there was the hand back and forth about maybe he'll change his mind. He has changed his mind in the past, but it was pretty clear this time. It's just a matter of when, not if, and today was when. Sad to see him go, but Eagles, I think, are prepared, and they've been preparing for this for years. You can't replace players like this, but at least they have a plan in place, and Cam Jurgens will move over and take over in center, and we'll see how it works out.
And you were down there today at the NovaCare?
Yeah.
How was it? How was it being in that room, man? Because it was tough watching it on TV. I can only imagine being down there.
I mean, very emotional. Obviously, Travis was there. Travis Kelce, Jason. We put the over under on tears. Jason's a very emotional guy, so he's been a crier in the past. So I put it at 2 minutes. He didn't get 2 seconds in, so I got that wrong way off the bat. So, yeah, a lot of emotions, and he had Travis breaking down, and he had said this for a number of years that he wanted to do it the right way, and he wanted to make sure he was able to thank everybody who had been a part of his career, and he got most of them today. So it's fun to see when you get to cover a guy like Jason Kelce and have all the success and leave at the top of his sort of career, because even though he's 36, the most interesting part to me, I know people get caught up in the emotion, but I got back here. I was covering another team in a different city, and I got back here in 2016, which was the exact year where people were thinking maybe Jason Kelce would get cut. And people kind of forget that. And I remember the first time I met the guy, he was walking up the stairs at the NovaCare complex and sitting with a couple of reporters, and he was just working out in the off season. And he said, "I'm still here for now." He thought he was going to go. And he mentioned that with Jeff Stoutland today. So it was that season, 2016, where a lot of people were trying to run Jason Kelce out of town, and he mentioned that one guy in that building wanted him, and that was Jeff Stoutland, and that's when it all turned around. Ever since then, basically 6 all-pro nods over that 7-season span, which is pretty phenomenal. You normally, we talk about the other player who might retire this offseason, likely to retire, Fletcher Cox. That's a typical career. Fletcher was a very dominant player early in his career. And then he's still a good player. He had a great year last year. Not a lot of defenders had good years, but Fletcher did. But he's not at the top of his game. Jason somehow got better in his 30s, which is very, very, very rare. So it was an interesting career.
Yeah, and it's evidence sometimes that you can't give up on guys. We saw the same thing with another long-tenured Philadelphia Eagle, Brandon Graham. There were a lot of people ready to give up on him early in his career, and look what happened. So, I keep thinking about Nolan Smith. I know there's a lot of people, Nolan Smith had a terrible rookie season. Well, it was a rookie season. You can't give up on guys that early in their career.
Yeah, you would think you'd learn from Brandon. I mean, Brandon thought he was going to get cut for Travis Long. If anybody remembers Travis Long, Chip Kelly really, really liked Travis, who tore his ACL. If he didn't tear his ACL, Brandon Graham probably would have been cut. And it's sort of that butterfly effect okay, they needed somebody. And then even the next year, when Brandon played pretty well, he still wanted to get Travis Long back in the mix, and he tore his ACL again. And all of a sudden, Brandon Graham takes off and becomes the player that he became. But yeah, there was that narrative for years that Eagles should have taken Earl Thomas, Eagles should have taken Jason Pierre-Paul, who are both great players. And Earl will probably be in the Hall of Fame. He was that good. But I find it ironic that Brandon actually surpassed them. He actually stayed in Philadelphia, obviously longer than Earl Thomas did in Seattle, and JPP, obviously, with the Giants. Um, Amazing how that worked out.
And Jason got into a lot today. You mentioned he thought he was going to be cut in the 2016 season when you got here. He also talked about, which surprised me, was Garrett Reed's overdose at training camp that year, which shows it must have really had an impact on the players on this team that were there when that happened.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and I wasn't here at the time, and that was, I remember covering the league from afar, and I thought that was going to be one of the biggest NFL stories ever. And it kind of went away quickly. I always wonder what happened, to be honest, from a reporting standpoint. Um, I think about that in a cynical way. I think, boy, the Eagles don't want to bring that up because that was and we all know the stuff that was in Garrett's room and all that kind of stuff. And the NFL, I think, did a good job from their perspective, kind of wiping that away. But from the Eagles players' perspective, it was obviously a very emotional time, brought them together, and obviously the Reed family. And everybody has so much respect for Andy. And he mentioned about how that, he's never been closer to a group of guys and what that meant going through that together. Um, yeah, that was an ugly scene. So he was going through some of the moments. Most of them were good. Nick Foles had a great line about Nick that I won't say, but
And I was watching it on TV and they bleeped it. They kind of like reversed what he was saying. So it was all black. So I'm like, crap, I had to go online to hear what he said. And it was classic.
Yeah, the classic BDE for people that know what that is. But and Nick's some people know his nickname, some people don't. But it's
it's also funny that that's his nickname because he's like the most religious guy, Nick Foles. Everybody in town calls him BDN.
Yeah, well, it is what it is for, and people have seen it. So it's not an old wives' tale. But he mentioned the snow game against Detroit and all that kind of stuff. And obviously even the Rams game where Carson Wentz tore his ACL and that was amazing because I remember being at the NovaCare complex after they came back, and there was sort of a wake type feel in that thought the season was over for a short period, started feeling, woe was me. And all of a sudden the guys, Malcolm Jenkins, he mentioned, addressed the team. And all of a sudden they use it as fuel and they go and have that run. A great line about Brandon Graham. He stopped Tom Brady once, only once, literally once, I think is what he said, because they gave up 505 passing yards. I mean, what a career. Tremendous, again, 6 out of 7. He ends 6 out of 7 seasons with all pro honors. It's kind of amazing. And we all know what Travis has become and the fact that he was there, and even Kylie, his wife, was there. His everybody knows his mom. A lot of people know his dad because the Kelces have become such stars, and they were all there. I counted there were 29 reserve seats for people to sit and typically. So, this type of player retiring doesn't always happen. So, you don't see it very often, and he could he could definitely still play, but the durability he's shown is maybe the most amazing aspect of his career. And I do think a lot of people don't realize how much pain he's in on a week-to-week basis, even though he fights through it. And you get to a certain age and you start wondering, you want to play. In his case, he wants to play with his 3 daughters and be able to have a quality of life. And he's always said, he got that advice from both Howard Mudd and Jeff Stoutland before Howard passed away. And um, he knows, and it's time to walk away.
And you mentioned Kelce talked about Malcolm Jenkins, who was a phenomenal leader on that Super Bowl team. Well, now Kelce retires. Reports are that another great leader on this team, Fletcher Cox, is probably going to retire. Who do you see stepping up, especially on the defensive side of the football, as the true leader of this team in 2024?
Well, I think there's going to be so many changes on the defensive side of the football. But some of these young guys, and Fletcher Cox, that was sort of maybe going to be his last sort of gift to this team. He's been trying to preach to Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter that, they're going to have to take over this defense and become leaders. We'll see if Nakobe Dean is the potential middle linebacker, but they're going to bring a lot of people in. Obviously, Slay is the captain. He'll be here this year, so he'll be a big part of the leadership aspect. But yeah, I mean, it's to be determined, and obviously BG is still going to be here, but there's only so much you can do at that stage of your career when people know this is going to be Brandon Graham's last year. He's already said it numerous times. He wants to get to 15. This will be 15. Only plays, 25, 30% of the snaps. So some of these young guys are going to have to take it, seize that mantle and become leaders. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Very few teams have that core 4 that the Eagles had. And Nick Sirianni talks about it all the time. When you're a first-time head coach, you usually don't have veterans like Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham. I mean, it just doesn't happen with the modern NFL. There's so much turnover. So now the Eagles will be more like everybody else. And it's been a luxury to have these 4 guys together for so long. And you knew it was going to end at some point.
Yeah, I know. I thought this was coming. I expected it to come, but it didn't make it any easier today watching Jason Kelce breaking down emotionally, saying his goodbyes. But now I know you've probably talked about this on your show, Birds 365, but you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it. What do you see as the biggest needs? You talked about a lot of new players probably coming in on defense. What do you see as the biggest needs on the defensive side of the football?
Boy, they need everything, except maybe for defensive tackle, which is one of the reasons why Fletcher's probably going to retire. He saw the writing on the wall. Anytime and people think about the last 2 years when they took Jordan Davis at 13, Jalen Carter at 9, but you can go back even a year further when you take Milton Williams in the 3rd round. When you use that much premium draft capital on one position, you want to get those guys up to speed. Those are the guys you're going to lean on, and that'll be the case. So other than that, they need everything. And maybe it gets a little bit more dire at edge rusher, depending what happens with Hassan Reddick, which can go either direction. Obviously, if they move them, then they're definitely going to need an edge rusher. We know they need a corner. You could argue they need multiple linebackers, and they certainly need at least one safety. So basically, I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Everything except defensive tackle, I would say, is a need on the defensive side of the ball. And that shouldn't be a surprise because they were bad on defense last year. There's no other way. There's no way to frame it other than they were a bad defensive football team.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't pass the eye test, but you could also look at the stats, and they ended up in the bottom of almost every single category. Now, looking at the cornerback position, though, because I've been saying on this show and on my other show, the Philly Sports Power Hour, that I look at linebacker, safety, edge rusher, and corner. And I actually put corner fourth on the list because I'm expecting Isaiah Rodgers, who they picked up from the Colts, to come in and pick up right where he left off, which was pretty good in 2022. And Keely Ringo, 21-year-old fourth-round rookie, started showing us some things at the end of last season. You have Zach McPherson coming back from his Achilles tear. So do you think those guys can make that leap in 2024 and be really good corners in this league?
Maybe one. And I would throw, and I know people don't want to hear this, but especially with Vic Fangio coming in, James Bradbury's under contract. Let's see what Vic can do with him. He has a history of having a bad year, then having a good year and bouncing back. And I think people forget how the Eagles made a mistake by jerking him around, playing him in different positions, playing him in the slot. I still don't understand that. And maybe he can have that bounce back year. Now, it all depends on Vic Fangio's evaluation. If he's done, he's done. If they think he's lost a step, and the Eagles, remember, have all this access to GPS data now. They know what he's running. They know how bad it was compared to the year prior. So you could say, he just lost it, and that's a possibility because that happens in the NFL. But if Vic Fangio believes, look, he's a zone defensive coordinator, they're going to play a lot of zone, and that's James Bradbury's strength. So I wouldn't just close the book on him just yet. We'll see how it shakes out. I'm with you with Ringo. I liked what I saw. I think he's got a long-term potential to be a really good starting outside corner, but you can't count on him. You can't say, oh, we're going to cut Bradbury and Ringo's going to start, or we're Isaiah Rodgers. Technically, we all think it's going to happen. It's probably going to happen, but there's no guarantee he's even going to be reinstated. So, first things first, he's got to be reinstated. Then he's had a year off from football. I would say to lean on that because he had some nice, and he looked like an ascending player in Indianapolis. Deshaun Watson looked like a superstar quarterback, and he didn't play for a year plus, and he doesn't look like the same guy, period. Even at a young age, that could have a very bad effect on a player. So same thing. I don't think you can count on him. Can't count on Eli Ricks. So they have to bring in, if they're not going to move forward with James Bradbury, they have to bring in some kind of veteran presence. And Rodgers, I think, is better suited to move inside. Now, he played outside in Indianapolis.
He didn't play much in the slot at all.
No, but that's because the Colts have Kenny Moore, who is top 2 or 3 slot cornerback in football. But if you just look at the Eagles and, another name, Isaiah Avonte Maddox, has been in the past one of the best nickel corners as well. He has been injury prone. So that's a difficult decision, and he's expensive. And where are the Eagles going to go with him? But if they need a nickel corner and they're going to move on, Rodgers is 5'10" and 172. So I think people look, and I've seen it, people look way too much at not understanding. All right, yeah, he played outside in Indianapolis, but he played outside because they have one of the best slot corners in football. So if they didn't have Kenny Moore, they would have played him inside. So it doesn't really matter where they played him because they were in a different position with a really big time player. 5'10", 172. You want him on the outside?
Yeah, he looks like he'd be a slot corner.
Yeah. And I think that's where the Eagles project him. And we'll see. But it's nice to have versatility. And remember, they have young outside corners with some potential with Ringo and Ricks, who are 6'2", legitimate outside corners. So I would be stunned if they don't move him inside, or at least try to play him inside if he's reinstated.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. One more for you before I let you out the door. I see people asking this in the chat. I don't know if you have the answer or not. When they re-signed Kelce last year, they kind of structured his deal in a way where if he wanted to retire, they could do some things. Do we know what the cap savings are going to be or what the cap hit's going to be now that he's retiring?
I don't have it in front of me, but I can pull it up real quick. Yeah, I mean, the Eagles set it up as they typically do, with a bunch of Boyd years on the back end to make his contract better against the cap last year. So they're going to lose some cap space. They'll do it basically. We're talking about dead money, 8 million, 7 million, 5 million, 3 million, 600. So they're going to be paying for Jason for years, a little bit on the cap. And the cap, remember, is going to continually go up over that span. So, I mean, that's how they do business. And they put the Boyd years on the back end to make the cap number more manageable. But no, they don't. It doesn't get wiped off the books. They agreed to pay this money, and they spread it out over that 5 years to make it better against the cap. So it's all that money from last year, but they spread it out over 5 years. So it's not crippling, but they're going to have some dead money, and the Eagles knew that, and they understand that. So they prepared for it.
Nice. Well, exciting, though. Legal tampering period starts in less than a week, which is amazing. We're there already, man. NFL 365 days a year now. That's why you have Birds 365. See, now I'm getting it. Now I'm understanding.
There you go. 365.
John, I appreciate you making time, my brother. You have a good one.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Good talking to you.
John McMullen joining the show, our Eagles insider here at JAKIB Sports. Also does a great job writing for SI.com. So make sure you check out John McMullen on Twitter. You can read some of his articles. Does a really good job covering the Philadelphia Eagles.